On This Week in Enterprise Tech, the FCC seems to be calling community broadband a possible enemy to the state. Apple's Tim Cook is calling for stronger privacy laws. And Brian, Heather, and I talk with AMD's very own Daniel Bounds about data centers and AMD EPYC. Twiat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, recorded November 9th, 2018. Data centers with AMD EPYC. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Introducing Rate Shield Approval. If you're in the market to buy a home, Rate Shield Approval locks up your rate for up to 90 days while you shop. It's a game changer. Learn more and get started at rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. And by JW Player, the most powerful and flexible video platform enabling businesses, including Twit.tv, to customize the video experience on their website. To learn more and get 50% off your business subscription, visit jwplayer.com/twit and use code TWIT at checkout. And by Avnet. Avnet and Not Impossible Labs created a historic event at the Life is Beautiful Music Festival, a first of its kind live concert that helped the deaf and hearing communities experience music in a whole new way. Visit avnet.com/music1 to see the journey. Welcome to Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Lou MARESCA, your guide through this big world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you through this big world alone. I need some help from some of the tech experts in the enterprise world, starting with Mr. Brian Chee, Director of Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu. Cheebert, it's been a while since we've been on together. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm actually testing a travel rig today. So you notice the little lavalier mic? It's a real nice small USB mic interface with a lavalier mic, and I've got my Shure earbuds in, and maybe I'm sounding just a little flat, but it's better than those tin cans that I had when I was traveling, right?
Hey, sound good, I think. I think it sounds really good. I don't think you're flat at all. Well, we have not one, but we have two enterprise experts with us today. Of course, we have our friend Heather Mo Williams, Senior Solutions Architect from Rutgers Networks. Heather, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Now, has the weather improved down there in the Friendship State?
Honestly, I wouldn't know. I woke up this morning with the flu, so I have everything boarded up and I have the heater going at my feet. It could be 75 degrees and I wouldn't notice.
Well, we're going to add a bit of sunshine to your day because we have a pretty great show. We're talking a little bit about how the FCC is claiming that community broadband might be an enemy of the state. But we also have a guest, Daniel Bounds from AMD, to talk about data center trends and AMD EPYC. But before we do that, of course, like we always do, let's go ahead and jump into the blips. Now, I'm going to channel a little bit of Denise Howell here because from This Week in Law, because do you ever wonder if you ever stopped by the police and they asked you to unlock your phone? Would you do it? Well, in some cases, people are claiming this is a actual violation of their Fifth Amendment right. What do you actually think here? Well, in the United States, several courts have asked to produce a warrant and to a defendant to unlock their phone, and they respond in kind with the act of producing passcodes is not testimonial because of the existence, custody, and authenticity of the passcodes are a foregone conclusion, which actually allows them to actually get a warrant approved. Well, the Florida Court of Appeals disagrees. In recent cases, the court has ruled that forcing a defendant to produce a passcode is a violation of their Fifth Amendment. Now, why, you might ask, is it a violation? Well, the court feels that compelled password disclosure amounts to forcing defendants to disclose the contents of his or her own mind, which is a violation of Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. And the latest from the Court of Appeals added that some of a more twist to this, in fact, that the government in the past has only had to show the defendant knows their password. And in this case, the court says that the government needs to show that it knows the specific evidence needed to prosecute the case is actually on the device, not just that there's a reasonably certainty that the device can be unlocked by the person targeted by the order. Now, this quote from the court adds, because the state did not show with any particularity knowledge of the evidence within the phone, the trial court could not find that the contents of the phone were already known to the state and thus were within what they call the foregone conclusion exception. Now, regardless of the foregone conclusion standard, producing passcode is testimonial and has the potential to harm the defendant, just like any other Fifth Amendment violation would, the court said. Now, the state court decisions don't have the power to change the way the passcode disclosure and Fifth Amendment cases are decided throughout the country. But if one decision of these defendants, they can actually refer back to in fighting forced disclosure going forward.
Boobs, brains, and Boolean math. You wouldn't think that would be such a difficult Venn diagram to understand. My husband has never had trouble with it. But as a motherboard article describes, when an Instagram post of a photo of Lindsay Scott was posted that described her skills and experience as a coder, the trolls just couldn't resist turning into doubting Thomases. Scott, who has a degree in computer programming from Amherst University and is also the lead iOS software engineer for an app developer, she happens to be an actress and a model, and it was the picture of her on a Victoria's Secret runway that led to the ill-informed masses publicly questioning her skills or tiskingly calling it a shame that she chose to model. Although initially reluctant to respond to the comments, in the end, she realized that this is a persistent problem, and even though she says she's accustomed to people judging her for her appearance and discrediting her coding skills for it, Scott stated that she was shocked by the scale of the problem. She got an overwhelming amount of positive feedback for standing up for herself against online bigots, and she wrote, "Looking at these comments, I wonder why 41% of women in technical careers drop out because of a hostile work environment. It makes you want to say, maybe it's not the women who are the problem."
Well, police managed to decrypt 258,000 messages after breaking the pricey Iron Chat crypto app. Police in the Netherlands said they decrypted more than 258,000 messages sent using Iron Chat, an app billed as providing end-to-end encryption that was endorsed by National Security Agency leaker Edward Snowden. In a statement published Tuesday, Dutch police said officers achieved a breakthrough in the inception and decryption of encrypted communications in an investigation into money laundering. The encrypted messages, according to the statement, were sent by Iron Chat, an app that runs on a device that costs thousands of dollars and could send only text messages. Quote, "Criminals thought they could safely communicate with so-called cryptophones, which use the application Iron Chat," Tuesday's statement said. Police experts in the east of the Netherlands have succeeded in gaining access to the communication. As a result, the police have been able to watch live the communication between criminals for some time. All in all, a very interesting development, and hats off to the Dutch police for the breakthrough without whining to the developers to put in a backdoor.
Now, AT&T is getting tired of dealing with content providers and routing copyright violations of their users through them, so they're going to pass the annoyance on to the violators. Now, in the coming months, AT&T will soon inform around a dozen broadband customers that their internet connections will soon be terminated due to copyright infringement. Now, terminating the accounts of repeated offenders is a new policy for AT&T and comes right after their company's $86 billion acquisition of Time Warner. Now, AT&T said the company will only terminate customers' broadband connections if they ignore the entertainment industry's repeated efforts to, quote unquote, educate them about the perils of copyright infringement. Now, according to AT&T, a small number of customers who keep receiving warnings despite their efforts to educate them could suddenly find themselves without an internet connection. Now, with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, ISPs are required to forward warnings about copyright infringement sent to them by the entertainment industry. Now, smaller ISPs have been battling this content and contention in court, arguing they shouldn't be stuck with the cost of paying copyright cops, especially since these efforts are often linked to so-called copyright trolls. Now, critics like the Electronic Frontier Foundation have long warned that terminating customers' broadband access is a severe, problematic overreaction to copyright infringement, especially given that broadband is increasingly seen as an essential utility. Now, historically, threatening pirates hasn't really done all that much to hamper piracy. So we'll see what happens here. This means that there might be another battle brewing in the coming years about one's right to use the net freely.
Tim Cook calls for strong U.S. privacy laws. Tim Cook was speaking at the International Conference of Data Protection in Brussels, but he sounded more like Dwight Eisenhower's 1961 speech warning the nation about the increasing power of the military-industrial complex. Cook said businesses are creating, quote, an enduring digital profile of each user, and that the trade of such data has exploded into data industrial complex. This is surveillance, Cook said, and these stockpiles of personal data serve only to enrich the companies that collect them. This should make us very uncomfortable. He also praised Europe's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and said that it was time for the rest of the world, including the U.S., to follow Europe's lead. His proposals include the right to have personal data minimized, the right to knowledge, the right to access, and the right to security. While Cook didn't name any specific companies, he seemed to be criticizing the advertising-based business models of Google and Facebook when he said that companies are putting profits over privacy. The Senate Commerce Committee recently held hearings on consumer privacy in what could be a step towards privacy legislation. Interestingly enough, testimony from AT&T and other providers was decidedly less complimentary of GDPR.
Well, we talked all about the IBM acquisition of Red Hat last week. And as a result, I got a PR person sending me a press release with kind of an interesting spin on this discussion. So I'm going to read this specifically from Sash Sankara, founder and CEO of Rackware. Quote, with Google pulling out of its bid, it appears that AWS was guaranteed to win the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, JEDI, contract. Now IBM has made a $34 billion bet by acquiring Red Hat in an attempt to catch up in its cloud contract with its cloud contract competitors, a move that could potentially put the company neck and neck with AWS. As the competition heats up, many are left wondering whether awarding the contract to a single provider is still the most advantageous solution with all these changes. According to the Department of Defense, awarding the 10-year, $10 billion contract to just one provider will improve security and data accessibility while simplifying the DoD's ability to adopt and use the cloud. However, there are drawbacks to being locked into a single cloud provider, including concerns about security, performance, scalability, downtime, and most of all, costs.
The force is strong with this one. Well, sending data wirelessly is cool, but the new kid on the block is cooler. Sending data through the air using light. Now, researchers at UCL, Northumbria University and Newcastle University are developing a new type of organic LED or light-emitting diode, which will communicate with smart devices such as tablets and phones to download and upload huge amounts of data. Known as Li-Fi, the new technology uses visible light communication to transmit information. Now, LEDs in ceilings can be turned on and off at a very high frequency that isn't visible to human eye to communicate with LEDs in phone, tablet, screens, and other devices. Now, incorporating the LEDs into a thick film, just 500 nanometers thick, could be used in smartphone or tablet screens, allowing it to actually use the as a Li-Fi transmitter. Now, light is already an infrastructure in place at all workplaces, so taking advantage of this is kind of genius, if you ask me. Now, the new LEDs bring what they call and developed. They actually developing this new technology during this project. Not only did they provide light, but they were actually able to provide additional functionality to allow them to communicate with other devices as well, not only delivering data but receiving data back as well. Now, the age-old Morse code with light signals had something to talk about back in 1836. Now it's time to channel some Samuel Morse in the Li-Fi of the future. Well, folks, that does it for the bytes. Next up, we talk about, that does it for the blips, but next up, we talk about the bytes. We're going to talk a little bit about the FCC and how they're talking about community broadband. But first, we'd like to thank a sponsor in This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Rocket Mortgage. Now, home buying, it's really not easy. I can tell you it's quite stressful. I've gone through it myself several times, and I'll tell you when I do actually have to go look for all my papers in my house, for all my filing cabinets, I have to deal with different bank reps all over the place. I even have to worry about interest rate hikes. Now, it's nerve-wracking and it can take forever. Now, the market is unpredictable, so Rocket Mortgage and Quicken Loans have tried to figure out all these pitfalls, and they're doing something about it. Now, they're calling it the home buying process. Now, here's how it works. You actually answer a couple questions here, and they'll check your credit. They pre-qualify you in less than 24 hours to give you a verified approval. Now, what is that? Well, it gives you the strength of a cash buyer. Now, in the current market, that's a huge advantage as a buyer, because sometimes you actually have to put an offer in at a moment's notice right at an open house. Now, once you are verified, you're qualified for their all-new exclusive Rate Shield approval. Now, first, they'll lock up your rate for up to 90 days while you shop. Now, here's the best part. If the rate goes up, your rate stays the same. Now, you're probably thinking, well, if the rate goes down, they won't tell me about it. That's not true. If the rate goes down, your rate also drops too. Now, if you ask me, as a buyer, you seem to have the upper hand here because either way, you win. Now, this is just the kind of thinking you would expect from the America's largest mortgage lender, Rocket Mortgage. Now, if you're even thinking about buying a house, go out there right now to rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. In less than 10 minutes, your info could be entered and you're on your way to home buying freedom. Now, to get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. Rate Shield approval is only valid on certain 30-year purchase transactions. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply. Based on Quicken Loans data in comparison to public data records. Equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org, number 3030. That's rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. And we thank Rocket Mortgage for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, we here on Talk Twilight are big fans of community broadband. We've had several guests on in the past talk about it, and I can tell you there's been many success stories here. But the FCC seems to have feelings of something in a different way about community broadband. Now, in a speech given recently by FCC Commissioner Mike O'Reilly, he proclaimed that the community-owned and operated broadband networks would naturally result in local governments aggressively limiting American free speech. Now, in a quote from him, he says, "I would be remiss if my address omitted a discussion of lesser known but particularly ominous threat to the First Amendment in the age of internet, state-owned and operated broadband networks," claimed O'Reilly. In the U.S. to date, there are 750 or so networks to actually help and ensure additional broadband competition. Now, there's actually a local one over here by me in Issaquah called Issaquah Highlands Fiber. Now, O'Reilly's quote here is backed by some interesting data. Now, municipalities such as Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Wilson, North Carolina have been notorious for their use of speech codes in the terms of service of state-owned networks, now prohibiting users from transmitting content that falls in amorphous categories like hateful or threatening. Now, although historically this has never been enforced, it seems that there is the language in the terms of service there. Now, in Chattanooga, ISPs like AT&T and Comcast have been forced to dramatically reduce their pricing for gigabit broadband in particular. Now, Comcast also has forced to deploy significantly faster broadband in that city after it attempted to prevent the network from being built by filing several unsuccessful lawsuits. Now, it seems like I'm not gonna try to think what he was thinking at the time here, but I do want to throw this over to you guys, starting with you, Mo, because I think you have some thoughts on this, and I want to hear what you have to say.
I've worked really hard all week to not come out of the gate spluttering. I think at best, this is disingenuous. At best, this is disingenuous. I think that what I really want to ask is what the view is like from up his own tailpipe, because there is nothing about the history of these services that has infringed anywhere close to infringing on First Amendment. And to be honest, the bigger risk to these communities is that they don't have access to connectivity at all. More than governments or tyrants fearing the armed populace, I think they fear the informed populace, and this is something that, from education to economic opportunities, is absolutely critical to these communities that are searching for alternatives because the big for-profit ISPs have frankly just let them down. These guys are trying to protect their own bottom line, and I don't know where I get madder about all of this article, but the fact that they brought in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is a shining beacon of what a municipality or a locality owned ISP. These guys have gig internet, for crying out loud. Come over here and infringe on my First Amendment. Bring me the gig internet and I'll figure out a way around whatever you're trying to do, which, by the way, none of them have ever done. Nobody has ever tried to infringe on First Amendment. So this, I have to say, this is something that was brought to us by the brain trust that said that net neutrality was just a really bad idea. And we're used to Comcast being the bad guy in that story, because if it weren't for them and their bad actions, I mean, Comcast is the reason why we can't have nice things, right? So the FCC of that era said, look, you can't do what you're doing. Yes, we didn't have a law that said you can't do it, but the internet has always been open and free. But that was sort of understood. But now you're behaving badly, so we have to put in a law that says that the internet should be neutral. And lo and behold, it's not Comcast that's the bad guy this week. There was an article in Motherboard yesterday that it was Sprint. And of all things, they were clamping down on Skype, which, so, I mean, not to put you on the spot there, Lou, but Microsoft should have something to say about that, I think.
Well, first, before I say something about that, I do want to hear what Chee has to say about this.
Well, you know, I've been a big supporter of the concept of net neutrality. And I'm one of the first people to admit that, you know, laws are never perfect because they're written by people. Laws should be something that changes over time, that gets better over time. And the populace needs to take part in government. You know, you need to testify, you need to write letters and emails and so forth to your Congress critters. And the reality is this kind of thing is just bad. I mean, so what if there's language for the community to protect themselves? If you go through that ginormous document that is an end user agreement from any carrier on earth, there is all kinds of text in there to protect them because you want to cover your behind. So what if the communities are doing the same? You know, Chattanooga, you know, we're talking about places like the Bible Belt where they want to protect themselves. But yet, even though they're in places where the Bible thumpers are, you know, rule the government, they are still not exercising those clauses. They're using it just to protect themselves in extreme cases. So our friends in the FCC, hey guys, come on. This is, yeah, your head is very far up your tailpipe, and I totally and completely agree with Mo. And you know, I just did a rant just like Mo did.
No,
I'm
I
contagious.
actually want to throw it back. I want to throw it back to Mo too, because I think there's several angles we want to cover here.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the Center for Independent Living Resource, I've just mangled their name, but they have a map of the U.S. Of all of the communities that have been providing their own broadband. These guys are using the same business model that you see in community electric companies, the co-ops. Every man, woman, and child in my county can have electricity to their house because of a co-op. These same kinds of, and in some cases, it is the electric co-ops that are providing, that are becoming broadband providers. But if you've got 750 communities across the United States that are providing, and at last count, I think a third of them are providing gig internet service. I think that's a case of, you know, good old American roll your sleeves up and get things done sort of thing. I think it's the exact opposite of being a threat to any kind of, you know, motherhood apple pie in the American way. So I say open up the pipes and let the spice must flow.
You know, I gotta agree. You know, there's a lot of things that can be done, and personally, I wish we'd see more co-ops doing internet, because there's a cute trick. You can bond fiber optics onto power cables and provide connectivity. It's just that a lot of public utilities commissions don't allow that. In fact, Hawaiian Electric here in Honolulu has been doing that for decades, and the Public Utility Commission wouldn't allow them to lease dark fiber to different people. So there's a lot of things to be done. I think we could go on and on and on, but the reality is call your Congress critters. Tell them you are displeased with this. Rant in their direction, because your voice needs to be heard.
Fantastic. Well, folks, when we come back, we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Ride. I'm pretty excited about this guest. We have AMD on to talk a little bit about their new processor line and data centers. But before we do, we want to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is JW Player. Now, everyone watches videos online, and when they work well, you don't actually notice what video player is actually behind the scenes there. And if you look closer, you actually notice that it's probably JW Player. Now, I've built tons of front ends in my life, and I can tell you that JW Player is one of the most flexible and feature-rich HTML5 video platforms out there today. Now, it's easy to integrate, and you can customize to meet your site's brands and design, and they have some pretty awesome features. Now, if you've actually, it's time to grow up from YouTube for you. Actually, JW Player has you covered. Now, the spectrum goes from that casual YouTuber all the way up to the large-scale publishers and broadcasters who want to maximize, especially video ad fill rates and CPMs. Now, if you've visited the Twit website, you probably noticed that when you watch an episode on the site, it uses JW Player. Now, Leo actually says it is one of the most important features of the Twit website, with quick access to any show right on the site, is critical for Twit's business, and JW Player actually gets out of the way and lets that Twit shine. Now, Twit is not only the only one actually using this awesome player. Now, top websites and publishers like the Washington Post, Business Insider, and Vice all are able to customize the JW Player for their needs. Plus, that player integrates really well with their brands, and it seamlessly integrates into their website design. Now, if you're ready to take control of your video experience, here is what JW Player can bring to the table for you. They have buffer-free technology, which makes it one of the fastest players on the internet, a fully customizable player so you can match your brand, video CMS to manage your uploads and videos, and plus they offer APIs to help you enhance the experience and integrate it directly into your site's functionality. Now, plus, if you're running ads, this player will help you max out and fill your CPMs. Now, to me, if you're serious about offering content, JW Player is the way to go. Visit jwplayer.com/twit and use code TWIT at checkout to get 50% off your business subscription. This is a limited time exclusive offer for twit.tv listeners, so be sure to check it out today. That's jwplayer.com/twit and use code TWIT at checkout. And we thank JW Player for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, that's now my favorite part of the show, where we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. And today is no exception. We have Daniel Bounds, Senior Director of AMD's Data Center and Embedded Solutions Group. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now you're responsible for driving product strategy, marketing, business development of server, network, and storage industry verticals. But we always like to hear, and especially the audience loves to hear origin stories. Can you maybe give us a quick journey and summary of your journey through tech and how you kind of ended up at AMD?
Yeah, you bet. If you guys remember Compact Computer, based in Houston, that's where I cut my teeth in enterprise IT in the Industry Standard Solutions Group. I've done a bit of a tour around the industry. AMD is my first silicon gig, but I worked at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Cisco launching the UCS platform, as well as Dell and EMC separately. And then came to AMD. So about 20 years in the industry.
Fantastic. Well, it's a pleasure having you on. I'm having a little bit of, drawback in the history of my world here. I was an EE back in the day, and I worked on the Itanium processor. So this is a trip down memory lane for me, and I'm excited to talk about EPYC and some of the things that AMD is doing. So before we kind of jump into the technology, I do want to talk a little bit of AMD's strategy as they move forward, and they're kind of jumping into the data center. Now, back last year, I remember at this time, AMD was on around 0.5% of enterprise space market share, I think. And so it seems like there's a bunch of room for growth there. And so AMD's mindset is to kind of jump into the data center and different strategies here. Can you maybe talk about what AMD is doing here and some of the things they're kind of going to be shipping soon?
Yeah, it's kind of like the AMD logo up and to the right. Yeah, so 0.5 is probably generous. Opteron was a product that at its height grew to be about 33% of the revenue and about 27% of the units. But in some ways, the company, the roadmap on the high performance side kind of lost its way. And so the present leadership, Lisa Su, Mark Papermaster, Forrest Norrod, they came in the 4 to 5 year mark back 4 or 5 years ago, and really made some hard choices. And in fact, getting us out in terms of a hiatus from the market so that we could go back and take a look at what it would take for us to be a major presence, and also provide the type of competition and innovation in the market that, frankly, customers deserve. Having only one vendor really makes things difficult, not just from an economics perspective, but also impedes technology. So they did that, and as you guys well know, it takes a while to bring a high performance processor to market. We've been hard at work. Mm-hmm. I personally have been at AMD for a little over 3 years, and so in June of last year, we launched our new flagship data center product, which is the EPYC processor. And since then, we've been doing everything we can to still be very focused. We don't want to go and broad blanket approach to the market, but we do want to offer customers a choice that is really going to make a difference for them. So that's sort of our mission, is to continue to be an innovation engine in the market, and also do something that's very different than what they're getting with the competition.
Now, you did bring up the Opteron strategy that you had, and I did remember hearing about the fact that there was actually with the K12 ARM-based Opterons that were out there, and the fact that, hey, let's put a ton of micro cores on these on these dies, and then kind of shove those into the data center. So basically, the more CPUs there. What kind of happened even to that side of things? I think now that it's a little bit of a different strategy, but I'm curious to hear about the ARM strategy, where that went.
Yeah, I mean, ARM, I've got a couple of interesting stories there. So when I was at Hewlett Packard, I was part of the team that launched, I don't know if you guys remember Project Redstone, but it was a Hewlett Packard ARM-based product with Cavium. And that was great from a market moving perspective, kind of got everybody motivated, but the net impact to HP and to the greater data center was very small. Fast forward to my time at AMD, one of my first jobs was launching a product we called the A1100, which was a 64-bit ARM product. And I'll never forget going into the press briefing. I was maybe 3 or 4 weeks on the job, and all the questions were about, they had figured out that we were getting back into the high performance x86 business, and that's where all the questions were. We had cleared all the hurdles for ARM, 64-bit ECC. We had the right operating systems. We were really, what we thought, making it way more accessible for data center customers to begin at the very least proof of concepts, but certainly in areas like NFV. And storage, ARM seemed like a really great alternative, and yet all anybody wanted was x86. So for us, it's part of the strategy to be nimble. We certainly pay very close attention to the ARM industry and the development of it in the context of the data center, but we are absolutely clear. We are 100% dedicated to the EPYC product line as an x86 ISA, and really making it super easy for customers to adopt in their data center.
Right. So I do want to talk about the tech of the EPYC processor line, but before we do, I want to go back to the fact that the more cores. So the more cores, the better performance per watt, and so that kind of opens the door to kind of participate in what we see in the cloud service market trends as a lot of virtualization. Is that kind of AMD's major part of the target here, is to make sure that we can get into more virtualization, containers, that type of thing?
Yes, and so certainly the public cloud, hybrid cloud depends on economies of scale, and that means getting more capability, whether that be more density or just packing more compute capability into a smaller space. That's what we get with more cores. But the big trick, the big difference was the fact that when we came out with Naples, the balance of the architecture shined through. So this is where we added 2 more memory channels than the competition did. So you've got 8 memory channels. You got a ton of memory bandwidth to actually feed those cores and do something with them. And then we also kind of live in an era where a lot of people want to invest in machine intelligence and AI. Well, that means that there's going to be an accelerator attached, and so we knew that we had to go and create some separation between us and the competition, not just to be different, but to go and be able to attach more storage, more acceleration, all high bandwidth, and do that in a way that actually, again, adds value. We wrapped it in an SoC, so it's not a multi-chip solution. We also did this thing that feeds into your question around virtualization, which is, for the first time in my history in the data center, you can buy a 1-socket enterprise class server. Whereas everything before was either a 2-socket, 4-socket, or multi-way server. If you're buying down in the E3 stack or even lower in the stack with AMD previously, you were really defeatured. And so what AMD EPYC is all about is providing the same level or even greater capability, but in a 1-socket. That means that you can now vSphere, use VMware as an example. They license by the socket. So now I can get greater core count, greater memory bandwidth, greater I/O, half the licensing. Right. So from a data center operations perspective, that's pretty killer, considering how much they end up paying in licensing versus hardware.
Now, I did see that stat that what they were saying that 6.5 million 2-socket servers need to be upgraded the next 12 months by service providers. Now, it sounds like that even the current announcement about the 64-core variant of your EPYC processor, which I think was called Rome, is this kind of the target? The target market is that the fact that that these data centers are updating. It's maybe time to try it out AMD here, because we definitely are more potentially cost effective here.
Yeah, I mean, the market's changed, and we've all seen it happen. The move to taking some of your applications, and in some cases, a significant portion of your applications to the public cloud means that, you think about on-premise data centers in a different way. That doesn't erase the fact that the vast majority of enterprises out there have a huge amount of legacy apps and a huge amount of legacy hardware in their data centers. What I don't think everybody is really paying attention to, or at least it's not a big topic of discussion, is how much that aging infrastructure actually costs. And we've done a great job of continuing to support IT across all businesses or all industries. We've continued to grow, but we also have to think about the maintenance. If you're talking about an actual 1-socket server that does the performance and capability of a 2-socket, now you can go back and rethink how you transition hardware that's either gone off warranty, it's gone off support contract. We do see a degradation of performance over time with these servers, and then you got a lot of fail in place. So the cost to maintain that infrastructure is significantly more than what it would take to actually go and run a more efficient enterprise. And that's, the materials that you saw was an example of, take 300, take 1,000, whatever your VM structure is, and you're solving for a capacity and performance footprint. We challenge everybody. We feel very confident they can do that more efficiently from an OpEx and a CapEx perspective. Certainly from an OpEx perspective, than keeping their gear going if it's somewhere between 3+ years old.
Right. Okay, so let's kind of jump into the technology here, because I'm really interested about this as well. So the AMD EPYC EPYC's branded processors line. Now the paper specs definitely give it a reason for the name. I think they're pretty beefy here. Now the Naples processor, which was released this year, if I'm right, is 32 cores, 64 threads, 8-channel DD4. 128 PCIe Express lanes per CPU with 2-socket support. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and then the Rome one is the new one, which is 64 cores, 128 threads, and that's using a 7 nanometer Zen architecture. Now, that's 128. I mean, 64 cores per CPU, which now that you offer 2 sockets, it's actually 128 cores per machine we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, for those of us who get into this stuff, that's huge. Even with the current generation, and that's the real critical point that's I think sets us apart is we're talking about, you know, 32 cores, high performance cores per socket, and a 2-socket 64 times 2 with multi-threading. That's 128 cores and 4 terabytes of memory. It used to be, you know, that was a dream in a 4-socket system. Now we're doing that in a 2-socket system, and essentially what we announced with Rome was that capability doubles. So once again, you know, for every rack unit, we could be talking about 256 logical cores, you know, as much memory as you could throw at it at this point. I mean, there's effectively a doubling of the memory capacity with 16 gigabit technologies, and you know, you still get the capability to attach, you know, 128 lanes of I/O at full bandwidth, direct attach. So there's no degradation there. I mean, the capabilities are really starting to increase as we move into the Rome timeframe.
Now these are actually not small processors. They seem to almost be 2.5 inches, a 2.5 inch processor there. Now, are they worried about heat? Is there problems more with heat here? Because again, we have a much bigger, much more powerful processor, and we're compacting it down to a single machine. Is it any problems with heat here? Do data centers have to reconfigure themselves to be able to support this?
Absolutely not. So, you know, if you look at where EPYC is today, we've got TDPs from 120 to 180, and we've got a mid-range there in the 155 range. While we didn't release any details around the Rome stack, what we did say is it's system compatible. So, you know, for those systems today that run in a Naples thermal footprint, which again fits within. We have systems ranging from you know, 19-inch 2U standard form factors to more dense 4 and 2U 2 sockets, so 8 processors and 2U will be able to achieve those same densities. But now, you know, moving from 14 to 7 means that our geometries continue to shrink. We can pack more capability, and we also talked about an architectural change that is freeing us up a lot in this next generation as well, which we call, you know, chiplets. Where we take and we centralize all the I/O into a single 14 nanometer die, and then compute dies, what we call CCDs. That's where all of the 7 nanometer compute cores will reside.
Right. Now, the interesting thing is that what we see a lot in the articles out there, and maybe we can put that to rest, is the fact that side by side with the Ryzen AMD Ryzens, they're actually lower clock speeds. Now, this is is there a reason for that? Is there, you know, what can we maybe give a reason why we see that? And if it actually it's actually saying, hey, Ryzen's a little bit faster, but we can spread it out a bunch more cores.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so we're working within the constraints of an industry standard server when we're talking about EPYC parts. We spec them out differently. We adhere to different standards, and there is a balance element to it, and that's a beautiful shot right there. So what you guys are looking at is the Naples part delidded. So you see the larger I/O die, and in this case 8 CCDs.
Right. Now you talked a little bit about architectural decisions here, and I think there was an interesting architectural decision around the fact that everything kind of interconnect-wise uses Infinity Fabric here, which is both die-to-die interconnects and the communication between the different sockets. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I saw. Now, a couple questions around that here. Now, is by doing that, obviously we know that when you do have any type of inner silicon has kind of some kind of a substrate where you kind of have to go through that, you sometimes have to be slower. You have to kind of clock down. In this case, it's looking like 1200 megahertz. Is this actually changing or causing any type of latency in the CPU because of that? You know, what was the reasoning to choose that kind of interconnect between everything?
No. So there's a couple of things that we did not disclose at this time. So we've talked about Roam being a product that launches in 2019. In November of 2018, there's some stuff that we've held back. What we did release was the fact that in Roam, the Infinity Fabric is actually our next generation of Infinity Fabric. So you can imagine that there are speeds and capabilities that will increase in that time frame. There is, obvious to most of the folks who follow your podcast is, with Naples. We had to overcome at the very beginning, especially as we got the software ecosystem tuned for Naples, the fact that there's multiple NUMA domains that have to be addressed. If you're NUMA aware, great, and if you're not, well, then there are mechanisms that you can employ to make sure that you're not falling prey to certain latencies. And so that's a challenge that we try to address with Roam. So we've taken a NUMA domain out of the equation. Now all the I/O is routed through the single central I/O die, and so that's actually going to improve things. But I would say in terms of the actual latencies and a little more information around how we balance the architecture, stay tuned. I would expect that in the first or second quarter of next year.
Fantastic. Well, folks, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the AMD strategy as well as the EPYC processor line, and we'll bring our co-host back in to do some questions here as well. But before we do that, we do have to thank a great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Avnet. Now, Avnet brings new meaning to the groundbreaking technology. They want to make technology more accessible for everyone. And now Not Impossible Labs had an idea. They wanted to revolutionize live music. Now, live music for people who can hear can sometimes be taken for granted. It's an experience like no other because live music can affect all of our senses. Now, this is where Avnet took on a challenge to make an experience like this more accessible to everyone, including the deaf community. Now, how do they do that? Well, with Avnet as their guide, Not Impossible Labs evolved into one of the most sophisticated wearables on the market today, which actually helped bring the shared live concert experience to everyone. Now, dubbing it Music Not Impossible, the product actually allows deaf and hearing concert goers alike to literally feel live music through the advanced vibration technology. Now, the wearable technology helps the user immerse themselves and experience music like no other. You wear a vest, which actually sends vibrations through the ankles, wrists, and chest. And now people who can hear receive music vibrations through their ears, while attendees who are deaf and wearing these wearables receive those vibrations throughout their parts of their body, allowing many of them to actually respond to the music alongside everyone else. Now, for many, this is pretty much an experience of a lifetime. It's an innovation that literally opens up a new world of music exploration to those who might not hear in the traditional sense. Now, Avnet and Not Impossible Labs actually revealed this amazing technology at the Life is Beautiful Music Festival, and it was an instant success. And this kind of innovation was brought to the finish line because of Avnet. I love hearing about amazing and inspiring techs for sponsors like Avnet. This is so cool to allow to actually experience this and see this happening in real time. So check out Life is Beautiful Music Festival and see that, and Avnet debuting this as well. Now, if you want to see some more, visit avnet.com/music1 to see the journey. That's avnet.com/music1. And we thank Avnet for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we're talking with Daniel Bounds from AMD about data centers and the AMD strategy. I did want to bring my co-host back in, but before we do, I have a couple questions here about some of the use cases of these new processor lines. Now, we heard about Dropbox in the recent past here about the fact that they just pulled off of AWS to build out their own infrastructure and their own data centers, and they're actually going to utilize the AMD EPYC 7351, which is the one-socket version. Are we seeing any other applications here from some of the big data centers?
Yeah, you bet. So on Tuesday, we actually announced a partnership with Amazon Web Services for their EC2 platform. They have kind of their high volume M, high memory bandwidth R, and their burstable T instances. And so those are now running on EPYC. Look for the little A next to the M5 and the R. and you'll see that that there's a difference. So part of what you get with AMD that you don't get with the competition is the fact that as you get more capabilities for every dollar you spend, you actually scale better. And they're passing along, that cost savings to their end customers. So the, pound for pound, same level of performance, same level of capacity, it's actually 10% cheaper or more cost effective on AMD than it is with Intel-based systems. So that's sort of the first step with them. We've also announced platforms, both bare metal as well as virtualized with the Oracle Cloud. So you can go and consume those, and clearly they're focused on more of the business applications, so the JD Edwards and the e-business suites from an Oracle perspective. We've also made great traction with IaaS, with Tencent, and then Baidu is running, machine intelligence, AI, and some of their own IaaS on AMD EPYC, and that's where the one socket really plays in. So we kind of have a mix of what we're seeing between the one socket and the two socket. I would remind everybody, the AMD EPYC lineup was built to kind of be universal. So every processor in our stack, there's less than 14 of them. It's a very simplistic stack, but it ranges from 8 cores up to 32 cores in the current generation. All of those can be one socket or two socket. There's no constraint to that. All of those have 8 memory channels per socket. There's no constraint. All of them address 2 terabytes of memory per socket. So it's a very different approach to the stack, and we hope that is something that would delight hardware and software architects in terms of what they can get and what they can do with that within their enterprises. But to your question, the cloud guys have really embraced this, and folks like Dropbox, folks like Microsoft, who was one of the first to announce with their LV2 and HP series. We're seeing amazing traction there.
Fantastic. I do see my co-host chomping at the bit here in the background channel that we have. I did want to bring our co-host back in, starting with Mo. Mo, you had some questions about the competition as well as kind of the difference between CPU types.
Right, and I'll start with I'll just throw them both out and let you answer as you will. A question from the chat room asks about the difference between the processors and data centers versus like a normal desktop CPU. And then I sort of want to get your take also on the Red Hat acquisition. We spent a lot of time last week talking about that, and I'd like to get your perspective.
Yeah, so in terms of the differences, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but it definitely is an important difference. So when we look at the OSs that we validate, software is probably the starting point. We do far more validation for server OSs. You can imagine with data center products, a lot of the peripherals that we support on the client side, a lot of the graphics are just not interesting for most data center customers, even though we do have some tweeners that go into things that go into remote branch office type situations. But for EPYC, and to be more specific, the EPYC 7000 series, which is very analogous to the Xeon SP series. There's a level of RAS that is built into those. There is a huge amount of I/O, and frankly, with data center workloads, as opposed to we do have some very high core count products in the enthusiast gaming space, but nothing like what we see in the core of the data center. And Rome really takes that to the next level with the 64 cores. So big difference there. We also have some details in terms of how they're supported and the way that they're brought to market. So we separate those two. At the core of it, though, no pun intended, is Zen. And so that's the thing that is a little bit different for us, in that we part of stepping back from the market and rethinking how the role we can play and how we can help customers really began with the core architecture, and the beauty of that is that Zen not only was designed for the data center, but it's also kind of a killer part as you move into the client space as well. So you see that packaged in different ways, but certainly there's a fairly substantive difference between what you get in an EPYC processor versus a Ryzen processor, for example. And I also didn't mention this earlier. Part of what we announced on Tuesday also was, while we had the Zen core in our current generation, it's actually a new core that we're, Zen 2 is actually the name of it, and that will be coming out, with these products. So we'll see not only a step in terms of the packaging and the architecture, but we'll also see a brand new high performance core that's coming. So you can imagine that's very exciting to us across our product lineup. And you asked a separate question, didn't you?
I did.
What was the second question?
I was just wondering about your take on Red Hat.
Oh, Red Hat, yes. You hang around long enough, you see all kinds of consolidations in the industry. I think what everyone is looking at right now is how do I stay relevant in an era where more and more companies are becoming service providers, while hardware is still incredibly important. And that's, frankly, that's why we're here. AMD historically has been an innovation engine. We were the first to 64-bit. We developed that instruction set that is in every x86 CPU. We were the first to integrate the memory controller, first to break the gigahertz barrier, first to do more multi-core. That's in our DNA, and as you can see with the products, we're not letting up, and we'll continue. We talked through our fourth generation of EPYC product at this event, so we're excited about doing that. But I think this is an expression of where IBM has evolved to, and a recognition that Red Hat has gotten a lot of things right when it comes to cloud. And that's valuable and is kind of the next step in their evolution. I'm interested to see how it plays out. I've lived through a good deal of acquisition activity. It's never an easy thing, but those who pull it off well tend to benefit greatly.
So I'm representing the academic world, and we're always into HPC, and cores are the name of the game. Are you doing something in your new product line to cater to the HPC world?
Yes, and I'm so glad you asked that. So one of the things that we took a section on Tuesday, and we talked about nothing but HPC. And as you probably well know, supercomputing is the time, or one of the times of the year that we all get together and hang out and talk supercomputers. But we actually had Pete Ungaro from Cray, he's the CEO of Cray, come on stage with us and talk a little bit about not just our legacy together, but really focus on our future together. EPYC, not just Naples. We've announced products with Cray that take advantage of Naples. We also announced a major deal with NERSC that combines AMD EPYC Rome and their new Shasta platform, which they just announced. It's kind of hot off the press. So that is an example of the type of momentum. Clearly we have continued to ramp up in this time frame. Sometimes it takes a little bit to show some of the bigger wins, but we've got a lot of exciting news that we've keyed up for next week in Dallas. When it comes to Rome and the applicability for the HPC space, the thing that, besides 64 cores and 128 threads, which is killer, the thing that I think everybody should be really excited about in HPC is the fact that we announced that we're supporting PCI Gen 4 on those products. So now that takes us to, very high speed, low latency fabrics. We're going to partner with the best in the industry, with Mellanox and Broadcom and others. And so I think from an HPC perspective, the future is really bright. Historically speaking, Opteron was a really important component to a lot of folks who work in HPC. We saw a lot of success there with EPYC. that kind of the mojo was back. World record floating point performance, all of the I/O capability that we brought, 128 lanes, and huge flexibility in the stack. And we actually might have a few more tricks up our sleeve in the coming weeks. But when it comes to Rome, I think the HPC folks that pay attention and appreciate AMD will really get jazzed about the new product.
Well, we are definitely out of time for you because you've got to go run to a next meeting.
Yes.
Can you tell the people watching where they can find out more about you and what you're doing and so forth, and then we'll say goodbye?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys have our Twitter handle at AMD Server. Go to AMD.com. Right on the homepage, there's a link to our server business and EPYC. Not only that, if you're heading to SC18 next week, if you're heading to HPE Discover, if you're heading to AWS reInvent, we're canvassing the market. And looking to have discussions with everybody about EPYC and what we can do to help really modernize the data center and help everyone create a better solution. And by the way, guys, thank you so much for the time today. I really had a blast being here.
Thanks for being on. Well, folks, unfortunately, we've run out of time. You've done it again. You've watched another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 CPU cores. But I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-hosts, without whom I wouldn't want to do this show, starting with Miss Heather Williams. Heather, where can people find you and all of your work?
Well, they can find my snark on Twitter at MoBetterWiFi. I usually hide out here at the little cabin by the lake. And if not that, then I'm at a conference for Ruckus.
Fantastic. We also have to thank our very own co-host and producer, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, where can people find you and all of your work?
On Twitter, I am ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. And I am also Cheebert at TwitTV. Better yet, use Twyet at twit.tv. That way your email will hit all the hosts. And keep in mind, we have 5 people, so we can rotate around. I just happen to be on this time. It'll probably be some of the other folks like Brian McHenry or Kurt Franklin next time. But please send us your show ideas. Love to hear them. And we'll have some interesting new startups coming your way soon.
Fantastic. Well, Heather, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. I would not want to do the show without you. Well, we also want to thank you. You are the person that drops each and every week. You drop in, you watch the show, you support us, and you get your enterprise goodness. And we want to make it easy for you to enjoy the show each and every week, whether you're watching it or listening to it. So go out right now to twit.tv/Twyet. There you'll find all of our back episodes and all the show notes, co-host information, guest information. But more importantly, next to those videos right there, you'll actually see the subscribe or download links. Now you can subscribe to the format of your choice, whether it's audio or video version or HD video, as well as you can listen on the device of your choice. And now you can find the way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT goodness. Now, after you subscribe, share the show with your friends, because we can't continue to do this show without their support and your support. But we also want you, after you subscribe, if you remember that we actually do this show live each and every week at 1:30 p.m. Pacific at live.twit.tv. So come see how the show is run and behind the scenes. Of course, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room as well, and that's irc.twit.tv. We get some pretty great discussions going in there each and every week, so we would love to have you in there. Now, also don't forget to follow me at twitter.com/LouMM, where you get to see all what I do during my normal work week. In fact, go out right now and check out dev.office.com. You can see all the posts and the latest and greatest about customizing Office and making it more productive for you. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa, who continue to support us and doing This Week in Enterprise Tech, as well as, of course, our tireless producer, Mr. Brian Chee. He continues to book and plan and do all the background work for us, and we thank him for everything that he does. And, of course, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. That's Alex. Alex, you have to know what today's show was all about. I think today's show is about time travel, and when you slingshot around the sun to do something, the last part first and the first part last, I think. So literally, that's what the show is about. But
Yes,
no,
time travel.
actually, unfortunately, you were so close, but it was actually epic. It was just truly epic today. And for folks, if you want to come back and check out our epic episode next week, do that. And until next time, I'm Lou MARESCA saying, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.